Welcome to this episode of Navigate. I'm your host, Tim Austin, and this is a podcast where we try to take some of the guesswork out of transition. As always, my hope is that these conversations provide you with valuable tips and resources to engage with on your unique transition journey. Are you in a place and season where you could really use some resources to help you navigate a challenging transition or help you develop professionally in the context of your calling? I know you'll be encouraged today as you listen into this episode of Navigate, because we're going to be talking about some resources that are available to you right where you're at. No travel needed. Resources that can help equip and connect you to the broader global community. And for that purpose, I've invited a very special guest onto the show today. Amy Young is a writer, speaker, and advocate for embracing the messy middle in life. After nearly 20 years in China, she co-founded the online community Velvet Ashes and founded Global Trellis, which provides spiritual and professional development to cross-cultural workers right where they are. Again, no travel needed. Amy also helps cross-cultural workers flourish by writing books such as Looming Transitions, enjoying newsletters, and her most recent book, Getting Started. She enjoys cheering for the Denver Broncos and the Kansas Jayhawks. And though she misses steaming dumplings in Beijing, Amy currently lives in Denver, Colorado, and much to her surprise, enjoys gardening. So, thanks for listening in, and let's dive into my conversation with Amy Young. Hi, Amy. Welcome to Navigate Podcast. I'm so glad that you could join me today.
Tim, thank you. I am so thrilled to be here.
Yeah, we've been going back and forth a little bit for via email for a while, and I'm just it's always one thing to talk about having a conversation. It's another thing to actually get it on the calendar. So you know how that goes.
Yes,
we did it. We're here today, and we're going to talk about all things related to global workers. I was telling you earlier, I have no big script to follow. We're just going to see where the conversation goes. But I remember, I think it was probably around 2015. It was several years ago when we were still living in Turkey. I hopped on a Skype call with you. We got to talking, and some of that was around what you were doing at that time with Velvet Ashes, and
yes.
And, I was really intrigued and impressed by and saw what a great support and a resource that was for global worker women like my wife, who was on the field, who's benefited from it, and other workers we know. And then so it just kind of popped into my mind at that time. That was several years ago. I don't know if you recall, but we were talking about what could something for, resourcing men on the field specifically be. Yeah. So that, was more or less just a conversation. And I thought that there may get some traction on something like that, but it just didn't seem the right timing. And the Lord has led in some different areas. And I'm still working on things to resource men on the field and be a resource and a support to them. But I just loved what you've been doing, what you've been involved in there. And now with some of the new things you're doing, which we're going to hear about today, I'm just really excited that you could join me today.
Well, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I do recall that conversation, and just, you're not the only guy that contacted us about, hey, is there like a Velvet Ashes for men?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's definitely an interest there and a need. And it was a highlight for Danielle and for me to talk with you and to sort of dream, what could it look like?
Yeah, what could it look like?
For resources for men.
Yeah.
And that's interestingly part of actually what led me to start Global Trellis. Mm-hmm. That is not just for women. It is for men and women, because it's so odd. In so many other areas, men are better resourced than women.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason in the online space, in the cross-cultural global world, there just seems to be a lot more resources for women. And golly, my heart just goes out to all the guys out there going, but what about us?
Well, I'm sure some of us, I have to confess, hopped onto Velvet Ashes and really benefited from some of those posts and resources that were offered there. So, we'll take it where we can get it. But yes, I think that you're right. There's a lot of men out there looking for things like this, needing things like this,
Yep.
and whether they be field based or online, resources. There's lots of room for growth in that area for sure.
Yeah.
Well, tell me where are we coming from? Where are you right now?
Right now, I am in the wonderful state of Denver, the wonderful state of Denver. I'm in the city of Denver, the wonderful state of Colorado.
Yeah. Okay. And is that your home state?
I am. And okay. I have to put it in there because I'm a third generation Colorado native. And there are not many of us who can claim that. So, whenever we can work it into a conversation, we do. Right.
Well, we love Colorado, and my wife and I spent about 3 years, our newly married years, out there while I was going to seminary, and I think we have that in common too.
We do. I know. I was reading your bio, and I'm like, wait, we went to the same school.
Yeah. So, we love Colorado. We're native Californians, but Colorado is kind of like our second home, or third or fourth or fifth, whatever, being hopping around the globe all these years. But okay, so tell me about what you're doing now. And I know you mentioned Global Trellis, but just kind of maybe just kind of a little of the backstory, what led you to this place, where you've been, and where you've been going, and how you ended up here.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will try and I'll give the short version, but try to encapsulate 25 years.
Okay.
And I think what's so wonderful is to get to hear someone's story, because all of us have a story.
Yeah.
And I would be very willing to bet that almost everyone listening to this, what they thought they would be doing and how the Lord used it and moved them, is in some ways so much bigger and so much different and just so unexpected.
So yes.
So when I went to the field, I was in my late 20s, and I thought I was going for 2 years, and I was going to go teach English in Asia, and then, quote unquote, return back to the United States to a normal life, which whatever that is. I'm rolling my eyes. I don't know if that comes through in a podcast, whatever normal is. And God just captured my heart. And I also think for all of us, if he would have said, look, Amy, this is the whole big plan, I would have said, no, thank you. That's too big, too scary. I think God is so gracious. Just like that verse in Psalm 119, your word is a lamp unto my feet. And when he gives us enough light, like for the next step, and to go, okay, I can do that one. I can do that one. I can do that one.
Yeah.
So long story short, I ended up getting in leadership with the organization that I was with, and I moved to the headquarters in Beijing. I at first was the head of the curriculum department, because we are a professional teaching organization in Asia. And I love that we took what we did very seriously and wanted to be the best that we could at since we were hired as teachers.
Yeah.
But I'm also the kind of person that I get a little bored after a number of years in a position, and I just need to keep doing something a little different or challenging. And so after 4 years in that position, I transitioned to being the head of member care for our organization.
Okay.
And I was the head of member care for 3 years. And during that time, again, God is just so humorous. I was like, man, it would be so helpful if someone on the field had a degree in counseling and understood life on the field, and not just like flying in for a conference and based out of North America.
Yeah.
And God was like, that is a great idea. You go get your degree.
Why don't you go?
And I was like, no, wait, I thought it was a good idea that someone would come and work with me.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up being back at Denver Seminaries in the States.
Be careful what you ask for, right?
Well, I know. Or be careful of the quote unquote great ideas you have.
Yeah, you're right.
I wasn't even asking for that. I just thought it was a great idea. So I was like, oh. And I returned after 3 years in the States. I returned back to China, and again was head of member care, and the organization, the program had just grown, so had other responsibilities. And I just absolutely, I think the thread that I see in my life is that God has called me to help those on the field. Whether I'm on the field or off the field, that I just love helping people to be the healthiest, to deal with whatever, if it's difficult, if it's exciting, whatever situations, with just resources and support. I love how so much in the Bible talks about good shepherding. And I love that is God's heart for everyone, the lost and those of us who are in his fold. It isn't just to use us up, but it's to tend to us as well.
That's right.
And so then
I think a lot of people, a lot of times we don't feel like we should ask for or even feel the need for support because, hey, we're global workers, we should have it together, or whatever is our the lens, kind of that which we see through in terms of reaching out for support, and all of that. And unfortunately, that's kind of maybe the mindset in a lot of contexts. So to actually say it's okay to need support, to need help, to need pastoring, shepherding on the field, or off the field, wherever you are, that's a huge thing for a lot of global workers to actually say, come to that place and say yes, and we're not everyone to themselves, and just kind of isolated out there. We can feel that way, but there are resources, there is support, and I love the way that you are communicating that in a lot of what you do. So,
well, one it's 2 verses, and it's in Zechariah. And of course, I didn't know I was going to say this, or I would have looked it up. But it's near the end of the book, and by this point, God, through the prophets, are just so frustrated with how his people should be taking care of each other. And so he's like, look, I'm going to give you up to bad shepherds. And shepherds who don't, and I might butcher this but know that my heart is to get the scripture accurately. But it's people that don't tend to the lost, seek the young, care for the injured, or feed the healthy. And I was like, oh, well, if that's what bad shepherds don't do, obviously then good shepherds do. And what just gets me so excited about that viewpoint of shepherding is it's so holistic, because all of us have been lost at some point in our own story, not talking spiritually lost, but we're just kind of lost in the quote unquote plot of our life. And we need someone to come and seek us, someone who's had experience, or just even to bear witness. Sometimes when you're lost, you just need someone to say, I see that you're lost, and that just stings. And you're like, thank you. That's all I needed. Just someone to bear witness. But right now, I'm in the weeds. That's all I need. And we're all young in some area. So to tend to the young, whether it's language school, a new stage of life, a new learning, going to language. I just said language school, new stage of life, a new field. We're all young in some areas. And so that part of us, and I think especially as we quote unquote get older, when I was in my early 20s, people recognized my youngness, and they could see that, and they could tend to it. As I quote unquote get older and wrinklier and need special glasses to read, my youngness isn't as obvious. But God sees it, and God says we're all going to have parts of us that are young in our lives.
That's good.
And injured, that we're going to need to have parts of us that have been injured be tended to. And I think so often we associate member care with those 3 pieces. And what I loved was God had a 4th piece there, and it was feed the healthy. So whatever in us that is healthy, God is like, I don't want to just run that to the ground till your tank is empty. I want to feed that. I want whatever is going well to just keep being fed.
That's good.
Sorry, as you can tell, I can go on and on about this because it just gets me so excited.
I love that
part for his people.
I love that part about feeding the healthy, and it's kind of takes me back to the preventative maintenance piece too, of health, and wholeness, in our own lives, and even just it's very fresh for me because I was preparing a message just recently on us being rooted and established, and that's out of Colossians chapter 2, and being rooted and established. And I was talking and thinking a lot about roots, from in the natural world, and how roots can be healthy, but they need ongoing nourishment and water and minerals and whatever they need to stay healthy, and they keep probing that out. They keep seeking it out, and we're, in the, in our own lives need the same. We need that ability and that mindset that no, I can't just think of, staying where I'm at. I need to be able to look for resources that are going to maintain health and vitality in my life. And what are those things? And sometimes we're in very isolated or places of conflict, places where there are all those things are just zapping, our internal resources that we have and the things that we have that we need to be replenished. So I love the fact that, feeding the healthy, that's super good.
I know.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So you did get your counseling degree and went back.
I was back in Asia for another 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
And then transitioned off the field. And it was at that time that Danielle, Patty, and I were starting Velvet Ashes.
Oh, okay.
And honestly, we didn't know that we were starting something that was going to get so quote unquote big. And again, I'm putting them in air quotes. I don't want to be like, we're so amazing. But we were just like, all right, God put this vision in Danielle's heart. We all were like, that is a great vision. And we all just jumped in with 2 feet and helped launch it and get it started.
Yeah.
And then it started in November of 2013. And honestly, by that spring, by only maybe 4 or 5 months in, it was clear that God was at work and that this was going to be much bigger or have more potential to resource and support and come alongside people on the field. And we knew there were men reading it too. So we always said we were for women, but we love that our brothers were reading too.
Yeah. Yeah, we were honorary members. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Okay. So that was going on. So and so fast forward now to Global Trellis and what you're doing with that. When I first heard rumors about Global Trellis and the rumors of that being launched, and I kind of thought to myself, well, this is probably more or less just kind of another blog with a few customizations. I was obviously wrong because since then I've been on the site. I've talked to you about these resources that you're offering and that you're putting on. So what are we looking at here when it comes to Global Trellis? What are we offering?
Well, and so last November, my time with Velvet Ashes had ended. I think I'm really good at getting things up and growing and getting solid systems in place. And then God is like, and move on to something else. So it was with very mixed heart, as a lot of us, when it comes to the end of one season. And you just still love that season and you love those people. And I'm still in relationship with them. And I mean, Velvet Ashes is one of my babies. I love her. But it was just also clear the Lord was saying, and your time, being on the inside is done. And so resigned. And just the Lord gave me this idea for Global Trellis. I have been one of the ideas that I'm just absolutely taken with. I read a book called Managing Healthy Tension by Tim Arnold. And it changed my thinking forever. Tim Arnold's basic premise is that too many of us in the West have been trained to look at a situation as a problem to be solved. And so we approach whatever as, okay, how do I solve this? And he said, yes, there are some situations that are problems to be solved. But often, and I find this very true in ministry, they are tensions to be managed. So it's two things that might appear to be polar opposites. And so it's not a problem to be solved. It's a tension to be managed.
Okay.
And I felt for many of us in the global community as very committed Christians, but also then when your work is related to your faith, it can kind of get that there's just that confusion of what is my personal relationship with God, what then is kind of my job, which is working for God, and then the professional development side of a lot of us either had really good training when we went off to the field, but due to distance, due to just organizations that are swamped, due to technology prior not being able to provide professional development on the field. I personally, as a cross-cultural worker, just always longed for a little bit of professional development being dripped into me. Because when I get together with all of my coworkers at a conference, I have to say my ability to absorb good training I wasn't able to absorb what I could have. I was either tired, or when we all got together, it seemed illness passed through us. And so half of us were throwing up in some hotel room somewhere,
Yeah.
And having been back in the US the last 6 years, I've gotten to go to some absolutely fantastic conferences for global workers. And I'll be sitting in a workshop and I'm looking around, and it kills me that there are 30 of us hearing this presentation or getting to participate in this conversation. And it just kills me. And I'm like, with technology now, we can get this out into people's hands.
Yeah.
And so Global Trellis really was born out of my desire for us global workers to be absolutely the most healthy, spiritually, relationally, in all regards. Unfortunately, that hasn't been our history. But
Right.
I just think, again, that's God's heart, is for his children to be well tended for. And so I want Global Trellis to be a place that manages that tension between tending our own souls with God, tending our own relationship with God, and also building our skills, getting better at running team meetings, getting better at negotiating contracts, getting better at planning budgets. I mean, just all of these life skills that all of our ministries require.
Right.
How can we grow in them? Because most of us went to the field. I didn't have financial training, and suddenly I'm having to build budgets.
Yeah.
I mean, just all of these skills that are not unreasonable, but
Right.
I went to Asia to teach English for 2 years. And then, 10 years later, I'm in charge of a pretty
You
large
find yourself.
program.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like,
other things. Yeah. That's so true. I often kind of joke about it, but it's true. I think over the years, after 20 years as a global worker, having my hands in involvement in a lot of different areas, I kind of became this jack of all trades.
yeah,
And I came to the point where I was kind of, in my 40s and thinking, and I hadn't really kept up with actually honing in, ministry skills, kind of developing some of those skills, professional development. I just found myself and I think a lot of us are in this position where we just find ourselves responding to needs, because there's needs all around us. And so we learn to do these things. At a bare minimum, we just try to get by, with what we can do. And so I found myself just kind of, what do I do well, and what do I love to do? Even there's that thing that, you're most passionate about, or those things that most energize you. So that's a kind of a transition phase for a lot of us when we get maybe into the later years. We're kind of wondering, okay, I can do these things, I can survive, or I can get by, but is that sustainable?
right.
Yeah. So good.
Yep. So at Global Trellis, there's 3 main ways that Global Trellis, and the tagline is rooting cross-cultural workers in love and competence. And I just think if we're rooted in love, how much God loves us, but also in competence, that we are competent in what it is he has called us to do, and we're growing. So doing that 3 ways. One is there are There is a blog component. So you are correct when you guess there might be a blog component.
Okay.
But and I know sort of these days blogs are becoming a little passé, but I think again that drip, drip, drip. If we just keep having these drips of conversation, it can soak in a little deeper and it can hold for the long haul.
It's good.
So Tuesday is Soul Tending Tuesday. So there's a post related to soul tending. And Thursdays are Skill Building Thursdays. So related to different skills that we as cross-cultural workers need. Then there's a monthly workshop. And this is the piece I absolutely love. So workshops have been recorded. They're about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. That when a person purchases them, it goes into their personal portfolio. It's called My Trellis. And they will have that workshop forever. And that's what I really wanted to create a space for cross-cultural workers to have their own portfolio for professional development that they can return to. When you watch a workshop, one of the pieces I absolutely love, I don't know about you, Tim, and the listeners, when I go or listen to a speaker or a teacher, I'm taking notes in this notebook or on that piece of paper or here, there, or the other. And I then kind of forget, wait, where did I write that down?
Yeah, where did I put it?
Where did I put that?
Yeah.
And literally like maybe 2 years later, I'm emptying a notebook and I find it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so good. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And so as I was working with the web developer, I said, I really want a way for people to be taking notes as they're listening to these workshops, and then their notes are kept so they know where they are.
It's good.
And so there's a note feature that you can take notes. But what's so beautiful is you could then print them out. You can share them with your teammates. You can download them to your computer, or they all stay in your Trellis, and it's searchable. So later, like, let's say you're like, oh, I forgot that thing that Tim said. You can go and just click, like maybe you remember he was talking about grapes. So I just type grapes and I hit search, and it will pull
really
up
cool.
the note. So I can get back to it.
Search for it. Okay.
And search for it.
All right.
And then the third piece is a quarterly challenge. So just something fun that's free. There'll be like a 7-day challenge where something will come into your mailbox. So I'm just working right now on the first one that should go live in a couple of weeks. It's a newsletter maintenance challenge. As someone who's been on sport for 25 years, it's been on my to-do list forever to kind of clean up my list and figure out who I need to add, who I need to take off, what I need to, those things that we just need to do.
Right.
And so I've devised a 7-day challenge that will just be specifically geared for anyone who's got a newsletter and is on the field. And you've been meaning to do it and you haven't. So every quarter there'll be some kind of fun challenge related to life on the field.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that's just to review here. There's four components. You're saying that you have the Soul Tending Tuesdays, Skill Building Thursdays, and people can see all this as they go on to Global Trellis, I'm sure.
Yep, those are all public live. You can see easily.
Good. And then the monthly workshops, and then the quarterly challenge.
Yes.
Those would be kind of the 4 components of. Yeah. Good. And I love the portfolio idea. I really do. I hopped on there. I signed up for the workshop. So I did this, and it's in now. It's in my portfolio. I can watch it as I need to. I don't have to watch it all at once. So if it's a 45-minute workshop or an hour and a half long workshop, doesn't matter. I can go on there and I can watch it in chunks, right?
Right. Yep. You can.
Yeah, I love that piece too, because like you said, kind of the whole, getting it in drips and taking it all in. Sometimes it's a time constraint. Right. Other times you just, there's just so much there. You want to just kind of chew on it for a while and go back to it later. So I love that. Okay. Very cool. Super. Well, I have there's another thing we kind of have some crossover with, or some connection, and that's you have the Soul Tending Tuesday, and for my podcast it comes out on Tuesday, so I call it Transition Tuesdays, because a lot of what I talk about in my podcast is transition.
Yeah.
So near and dear to my heart is walking alongside, supporting, resourcing global workers through transition seasons. So I'm hoping, and as I'm hearing you speak, that we'll have some more opportunities to collaborate here.
Yeah.
What is your, just on the transition side, resourcing, supporting global workers? I'd love to hear your heart around that and maybe some thoughts.
Well, you teed it right up for me, Tim, because I think, you know, my first book is called Looming Transitions.
Yeah.
And so I, like you, just want to help people when they are making transitions, because transitions are so stinking hard.
Yeah.
And interestingly, how I kind of got, quote unquote, in the transition business, I was after I had moved back to the field, having been in the States for those 3 years. And I have to tell you, and I would imagine you have experienced this, and others listening that you've experienced this as well. I thought going to the field the first time was going to be the much harder transition. It turns out returning to the field after a furlough or a break or a study leave was so much harder.
Mm-hmm.
It was so much harder for many reasons. One was, you know, when you first go to the field, I didn't know what I was getting myself into totally. I could sort of picture it. Number two, when I returned, it had been 12 years. And I was just at a different stage of life. When I was in my 20s, my parents were younger. None of my siblings had started having kids. When I was older, I'm leaving now nieces that are going to change a lot, you know, between when I see them. My parents are starting to get a little bit older. And I had, by that point, then made 3 or 4 major transitions on the field. And I was just a little tired of transitions. And here I am thinking, you know, like,
fatigue. Yeah.
Yes. And just kind of transition fatigue of, I don't want to be setting up home again. I don't want to be unpacking again. But here I am. Okay, Lord. So I had gotten all set up, and my organization asked me to do a workshop called, I think it was called, something along the lines of ending well. How could we have a workshop for people kind of going into their last 4, 5, 6 months of an assignment, and they knew they were not quite at the end yet, but that they were going to be ending. And I was like, oh, well, I've just gone through a big transition. I could do that. No problem. And I assumed there were a lot of resources. I think nowadays there are more resources for transitions. But as I started to do research, all of the research I found was related to retirement. And I thought, well, yeah, of course, retirement is a big transition, but good grief, we all go through a lot of transitions before that one.
Yes.
And so I just sort of made up some points and put together a PowerPoint thinking, well, I waited too late to work on this, so I'll do more research. And it turns out there wasn't as much available as I thought. So that's kind of what led to my book, was this workshop that I put together, this half-day workshop, and then just fleshing it out. Part of my job as head of member care, I every year would help transition, you know, it depended on that year how many new people were new to the field, but between 30 and 50 people to the field. And then each year helping about that amount transition off. So over the years, I helped hundreds of people transition on and off the field. And I just saw it's going to be hard, regardless of how well you do it. It's going to be messy. It's going to be hard. But there are some people that are doing this a little bit better than others. And especially those who are transitioning off the field, if it wasn't done as well as it could be done, the sort of the mess it left for other global workers and some of the impact on the witness to local friends. And it was just all of that collateral damage that part of it was totally unnecessary. That just, I'm like, like you, how can we equip people for transitions better? On the back of the book, the question that the book answers is, how can I keep my soul fertile and my sanity intact during transition?
So true. And like you're saying, sometimes it's not a matter of like we intentionally want to go out, you know, with leaving a wake of heartache or destruction in our path. We're just not equipped, and we just don't have we've never done this before, or we just need to be having some conversations around what are some things to be looking out for, to be aware for, to be preparing for? And so I love the fact that we can put a book like Looming Transitions in someone's hand when they're going through this process. And so, because like you said, it's so much of it is avoidable, and healthy transition is possible. And
it is.
In 99% of these cases, and so I love the fact that we can put these resources in people's hands and come alongside them. And for we talk about retirement, and oftentimes we think of, well, I'm leaving the field, but that's not necessarily retirement.
Right.
For us, it was, and we've had people ask us, so are you retired? Wait, I'm 52 years old. No, I can't retire. Serving overseas for 20 years didn't make me independently wealthy. So
right. Well, and even if you're 52, right, you still want to contribute.
I still have a passion.
What God is doing and doing things and helping and
So I needed support in that whole area of just kind of rediscovering what I'm passionate about and what would be a good fit for me going into this next season of transitioning, from the field back to my home country, but still wanting to stay plugged into the global, community and ministry and all of that. So I think that's really, really critical to, for us to kind of realize that there's a lot of us out there that are maybe transitioning, making that big one off the field, but man, they're so.
Well, there's other transitions to a different field, to another country, even within your organization. I mean, and all of these things to a different job or role or responsibility, to becoming a parent. So you maybe go to the field either single or childless, get married, and start your family on the field. So that transition for what ministry looks like with children and without is really different, as you know. So.
And so with that in mind, what are some things you did to kind of help people on the field through these maybe weren't making a geographical move, but there's life transitions, going on, like parenting for the first time and those kinds of things. I'm just kind of thinking of like mentoring, relationships, connecting people on the field for that kind of support through these kinds of life transition things. I don't know. Any thoughts around that?
The biggest thought I have is we just, as an organization, kept talking about it. We kept talking about transition stress. And we would have little presentations and just normalizing it, like that transitions are hard. It is stressful. This is what it might show up physically in your body. This is how it might show up emotionally.
Good.
This is, and trying to help recognize emotionally, we're all going to express it differently. So maybe they're going to cry a lot. And so it's easy to identify, they're sad because of this transition. Or someone else, sadness might come out as anger or frustration or snappiness.
Yeah.
And so to begin to recognize sadness, disappointment, stress doesn't manifest itself exactly the same way for everyone. And even in your own family, like a family of 4, one might manifest it by just being very withdrawn. One might manifest it by throwing absolute fits. One might manifest by crying. And one by just wanting to play video games, and just helping to normalize that it's going to show up differently. And if we can recognize, because I think it's easier to recognize how you process it and to go, that's how others do. And so when others do it, quote unquote, my way, I can see it. But when they do it a different way, I'm like, well, quit being a jerk. And
Well, and I think big transitions and stressful transitions have a way of just kind of getting us kind of self-absorbed into our own little world. And for me, kind of, I take it all in internally. Whereas, my wife might want to more outwardly process some things and things. And so just like you said, that awareness piece, who's around me, that I need to be, aware of how they're processing and be sensitive to that. And just, that awareness piece is so huge.
It's so big. And then one other piece I would probably say to people, and this is one of the chapters in my book, is that transitions are not just about you. They're not just about me. And when I can remember, actually part of my responsibility in this transition is also to help others around me transition.
Good.
And as you said, like big transitions, it's very easy to become self-focused because it is about you. Like you are probably the one having to pack up, find a new job, say all these goodbyes. It is your life. It definitely impacts you. But when I could remind myself, Amy, you also need to help your teammates to say goodbye to you. You also need to create space because all of that is so exhausting. And so sometimes I'd be like, I do not want to go to one more goodbye lunch. I do not want to share my feelings anymore.
Right.
But when I could remind myself that I am part of a body and it is about me, but it is also about them. And I need to be mindful of helping others in this transition and not only helping myself.
So true. Yeah. And that goes both with helping other expats and colleagues we're working with transition or as well as local friends too. And I remember when we were leaving and transitioning off of the field in Central Asia, our local friends who we lived in a very, very poor country. It was a very impoverished area. And yet they wanted to put on this huge going away farewell party for us. And I was like, no, number one, they don't have the resources to do that. They shouldn't do that. I was, kind of having this conversation with my wife and we were just kind of came to the conclusion, ultimately, what? This will help them this is how they goodbye. This
exactly.
will help them transition well. They're going to spend a lot of money, on food and just all of this. And they invited everybody and their friends and family. I mean, just so many people came to this, and yet it was important for them. And now I realize in hindsight, it was important for us. It was really closure for us, but it was important for them. And if we wouldn't have allowed them to do that, that would have been not a way to end well. So
it could have been a miss.
Could have been a miss for sure. Yeah. Good. Well, there's a lot of, and I kind of just think of sending organizations and the ones we sign up with. They're all across the board in terms of what they provide in terms of resources. Some have been around a long time, are bigger sending organizations that have a lot of resources and support for their people, are very intentional about coming alongside the member care piece and all of that. And others are just kind of maybe a little more, they're younger, newer, smaller, don't have all of that. So I really think we can all benefit from something like Global Trellis because, like you said, it's accessible from anywhere and everywhere, you are. And, but just like if I'm just maybe an example, if I'm just kind of diving into cross-cultural life and work and my sending agency is very small and doesn't have these kinds of resources, and I need help, maybe I'm just kind of looking for someone to help me make a successful transition to the field. And I come across Global Trellis. What am I going to find that might help me?
Oh, I would start off with just those blog posts every week, the small drip.
Yeah.
That I think from the very beginning, if a cross-cultural worker can learn how do we tend our own soul, stay in relationship with God, and just slowly kind of keep growing. I think that is one of the main things. But also the workshops. And part of the reason I wanted one workshop a month is to not overwhelm and to begin to build in that habit. That habit of, okay, I'm going to watch a workshop a month. And I would even encourage people, maybe you look at a workshop and you're like, that doesn't really apply to me.
Mm-hmm.
I just think I know how much I have gained from listening to other industries or topics that I think don't relate to me. For instance, this month's workshop is called Bootstrap Your Business Overseas. It's by Lauren Pinkston.
Mm.
And she's an entrepreneur who has started, I think, 3 or 4 businesses overseas. And so people are often asking her, how do you do this? And she helps how you bootstrap it without like you having to raise all the funds. Okay. Her explaining working with local partners and helping set up something in a different cultural context. Even if you're not starting a business, I just think she has wisdom to be gained from things to think through, even if you're thinking of just launching a new ministry or starting a coffee hour or an English corner, offering training on breastfeeding for women, just anything where there is an element of starting something new, even if it's not a quote unquote business, and doing it in a different context than your home context. And so I would just encourage people to do the workshop each month, to be a part of conversations having you think about things related to cross-cultural work. So far, when we're recording this, there's only 3 workshops that have been recorded, but the first one was on recalculating to change. And we're all going to have to do that on the field.
Right.
Your housing falls through. You thought you were going to be learning this language, you get to the field and your organization needs you learning that language. So you're internally recalculating. A visa is not granted. There's a medical situation. Like there's just all sorts of little recalculating and big recalculating that we need to do.
Right.
The second one is on bootstrapping your business. The third one is on team relations using the Enneagram. And it's really on how to have healthy conflict in a team situation.
That's good.
I'll be recording one related to marriage later this week.
Great. Tending
your marriage on the field.
Great.
And then going into Advent, recording one with a spiritual director on how cross-cultural workers can tend their own souls in big times of ministry that can be massive times of outpouring, but we need to be poured into by God ourselves. So that's just some of what I would point out.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I love, so don't just come across the title and say, well, that doesn't pertain to me, because like you said, you never know what you're going to find yourself doing on the field.
Well, see, that's it, exactly.
You're responding to needs and just kind of being led as the Spirit of God leads us into areas that we just had no idea. God is full of surprises and in His providence and His plan. And so, we had no idea, for example, in Central Asia, that we were going to start a business, let alone teach locals how to start a business. And we're like, that's way out of our skill sets. But to come across something like this and just to at least have it as a resource for down the road is so great. So I love that. What's as we're kind of getting ready to wrap up here, Amy, I'll just maybe share your wisdom a little bit from experience. What's something you learned recently while navigating a transition season? What's just something that we could leave with our listeners?
Well, my most recent transition was leaving Velvet Ashes and then writing a book called Getting Started, Making the Most of Your First Year in Cross-Cultural Service, and starting Global Trellis. And I remember saying in my last official week with Velvet Ashes, as we all know, official times and then just how long it sort of takes to wrap something up. They don't always 100% align. They did pretty well. But I remember saying to myself, oh my word, I forgot that transitions have detail babies. Like they make so many babies of details. Like it just was like detail after detail after detail of all of these. And once I was able to say that out loud, it just helped me to make peace with, okay, Amy, transitions just make detail babies. And so this this season of all of these details that you're having to manage will not last forever, but it is part of transition. And
Yes.
so understand that you are in a detail heavy season.
Good.
And they're just going to keep popping up. Like they just kept popping up. I couldn't believe how many details there were.
Yeah. I love that the way you put that, detailed babies, and it's so true. Yeah. It kind of is this ever expanding thing that's happening. But like you said, it's not going to last forever, but transition, it is a heavy season for that, for sure.
A heavy detailed baby season. So.
Good. Yes. Good reminder there. So one last question for you. What advice would you give to your younger self, particularly as it kind of relates to what we've been talking about today, or maybe some experience, as life experience as a global worker?
I think the advice I would give to myself is, the phrase I want to use is stay in my lane. With global workers, so often we have wonderful fathers and mothers of our work that are elevated. And whenever I would look at what somebody else, quote unquote, famous had done, I would feel so inadequate, or so like I was 100% missing the mark and disappointing God. They had done all of these revivals, and here I was making tacos for 3 Chinese students. And yet that's what God had called me to. And I know he was pleased with me and he loved me. And I just think comparison robs us of so much. And so I would just say to my younger self, Amy, enjoy being you. Don't think because your life doesn't look like somebody else's that it is less valuable, that it's less worthy, that it's less interesting. I think in this age of social media, there's such pressure to be doing fantastically fun things all the time. And my life, I think it's a fantastically fun life, but it does not look on the surface fantastically fun all the time. And yet if I just keep my eyes in my own lane, I am satisfied for the most part and content for the most part. It's when I start looking in other people's lanes that I feel either jealous or a little bit inadequate, or that I am not enough. And I think any of those messages, they're from the accuser of our soul, not the lover of our soul. The lover of our soul, if there's an area I need to grow in or be nudged, it will not come in the door of jealousy or in the door of inadequacy.
Good.
It will come in the door of maturity and growth and development.
Love that.
So,
yeah. Great. Stay in my lane. That's a good reminder also, and to avoid those unhealthy comparisons.
Yeah.
Good word. I love that. And just so glad you could join me today, Amy. And just being able to hear a little bit of your heart around resourcing and supporting global workers. And I'm so grateful to have another friend in that area of life and ministry. And just, we really weren't too far. We were kind of neighbors, I guess you could say.
I know.
For many years, because
we were
Tajikistan bordering China. But of course China's a big country.
Right.
Tajikistan is not.
No,
but so a lot going on. Global Trellis. I just want to encourage everyone out there, our listeners, and to spread the word, to hop on to globaltrellis.com, right? Globaltrellis.
Yep, globaltrellis.com. And Tim, I just want to thank you and your listeners. If you'll let me know when this episode goes live, I'd love to offer you all a coupon of 50% off of a workshop.
Super.
Either one of the previous ones and just type in Tim, small TIM, and you'll get 50% off a workshop.
Wonderful. Okay, you heard it from Amy, listeners out there, 50% off on a workshop at globaltrellis.com. Put in it's like a discount code.
Yep, it's like a discount code. There'll be a place, enter a code, and you just type TIM.
TIM. Okay. Super. Thank you so much, Amy.
Well, thank you. I love having these kind of conversations. I just think they're life-giving. They're life-giving.
Yes, I agree. Totally. 100%. And, this book that came out, so you've got Looming Transitions, that's been out for a while. Great resource also for global workers out there. And also your newest book, Getting Started.
Making the most of your first year in cross-cultural service.
All right. And you can find both of those books on Amazon. Yep.
And I have another book called Enjoying Newsletters, because I just want cross-cultural workers to love communicating with their supporters.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Enjoying Newsletters. So Looming Transitions, Enjoying Newsletters, Getting Started.
All available Amazon.
Yep.
All that. Okay. And wow, so you've had a productive season. What else? So what other surprises are there? Another book or something? Because I didn't even know. Like I didn't really hear anything about this Getting Started book, and it just popped up and it came out. So I guess maybe I missed some of the. Were there announcements around that, or? That's
okay. Yeah. Well, I have my author newsletter, so my poor author newsletter. They were. I announced I'd get it written in 1 month, which is the biggest joke on the planet.
Okay.
Yep. Well, part of Getting Started, I had to pull out. I wasn't able. It got too long, and so there's a kernel of based on the fruit of the Spirit, and how. Yeah. So we'll leave it there.
Okay.
Based on the fruit of the Spirit and cross-cultural work.
Okay. Well, thanks so much again, Amy, for joining me, and we'll stay in touch. And again, I really appreciate what you're doing. I know that our listeners out there really, and all the folks and organizations they're connected with are really blessed to have someone like you providing and coming alongside them with some great resources.
Well, thanks, Tim. I really appreciate you too. It's just fun to be part of the kingdom of God together.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
All right. We'll sign off for now. Thanks, Amy.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So how are you managing that tension between working for God and abiding in God? Which area needs some extra attention in this season of life and ministry? These are some questions that came up for me in my conversation with Amy Young. The great news is that resources are available to help encourage and equip us in both of these areas so we can better manage that tension. Throughout this podcast, we've mentioned a number of resources connected to Amy's work and beyond. And I've included a list of those resources on the show notes of this episode, so check those out. And don't forget Amy's offer. Hop onto globaltrellis.com and get 50% off a workshop by using the discount code TIM. And thank you, Amy, for that. Well, that wraps up another episode of Navigate, and I've been your host, Tim Austin, and you can learn more about my work as a coach in the global community by going to encompasslifecoaching.com. And if this has been helpful to you, let me encourage you to rate the podcast, write a review, share it on social media, and of course, you can always subscribe so that you're sure to get in on the next episode, and I'll catch you next time.